most of you know Vince, but for those of you who don't, Vince is the chairman of Chard Museum, and he's come tonight. He's going to give us a talk on the current situation with the museum, and I think what the proposals are for the future. Is that right, Vince?
Yes. It's really just to give you an informal spread of what's been happening at the museum over the last sort of 6 months, but also then give you a little bit of an indication of what we're doing in the next year or so when our dreaded lease comes up for renewal.
Right, well, I'll hand you over to Vince.
Before I do start on the talk, a little bit of sad news. I don't know who of you know Roger Carter.
Yeah.
Now, Roger's been in the museum for years and years and years. And I'm sad to say that he's now in a nursing home because he's had very Alzheimer's really suddenly has happened to him. So I'm afraid to say, poor old Roger's unable to live at home and he's in a nursing home. So if you know people who know him, please pass that information on so it's spread around the town.
Very sad news. Yeah, I know Roger from many years ago.
Yeah.
Ah.
Right. As Robin said, I'm Vince. I'm Chard Museum chairman, and I've got a few bit of notes. I'm not going to talk for long, and if you do start to nod off, just wave your arms, and I'll slowly disappear into the ether. You've all been up to the museum at some time. You all know that it's a building that's leased to us from South Somerset District Council. It's been around for about 50 years, since 1970. And we have an important point of our history in that next year, it will be time to renew the lease or something else. Now, we're all aware that finances are really stretched at the moment. And in our initial discussions with South Somerset, so it's the district council, not the town council, we've been given the opportunity to do a couple of things with that museum. We can either renew the lease, or we've been offered the option of purchasing the freehold. And the freehold we've been offered is £70,000. Now, whilst that might seem great, they've also put a caveat in that basically says that they're now not prepared to do any maintenance, any repairs, all the maintenance, all the insurance, everything needs to be funded by the museum. So, in effect, if we go onto a lease, we'll be paying the repairs. If we go and purchase it, we'll be paying the repairs. And that's not an insignificant amount because, to be brutally honest, not a lot has been done to that museum on the fabric for the last 10 years. The thatch is starting to show and things like that. So it's quite a challenging option. What do we want to do? Now, we've recently been very lucky in that we got a grant from somebody called the Architectural Heritage Fund. They've given us a grant of £8,000. And that grant is to employ professional heritage building surveyors to come in and do assessment of the structure, do an assessment of the thatch. We've also got a couple of designers coming in to give us some idea of what the options could be to if you want to redesign it to make better use of its space. And from that, we're hoping that that will give us an idea of, is it really a viable building to take on? Now, we're not professionals. We don't know all those details of the risks of taking things on. So we've also been able to employ a business viability consultant who's used to working with charities. So they're coming along as well to basically look at all the numbers that come out of these professional surveyors, look at our visitors numbers, look at how we can improve the visitors numbers, all this sort of thing, and then come and give us an assessment, probably February time, to tell us whether it's a real viable option to take the building on. Now, some of you guys might have looked and think taking on a 17th or 18th century stone building with a thatched roof is probably a bit of a mad thing, and it could well be. We think it's probably actually not a bad idea, because if you look at other museums, they've really developed into something a bit different when they've been given the option to do what they want to do. So it's an important step. It's a gigantic step, and hopefully by April next year, we'll be able to announce, yeah, we've bought the museum, or we've gone for a different lease, we're now running it, and we're hoping to take it to these different designs. Now, the danger about doing that is that the risk that it puts on the trustees, because the museum's run by 10 or so trustees at the moment. And at the moment, it's an unincorporated charity. And that means, as I'm sure you're aware, that the trustees could be responsible for some of the funds or the debts should that happen. Now, we're hoping it never will happen, but it's too much of a risk to actually go and own a building where, to be blunt, if a chimney pot falls off the roof and hits a passerby and kills the passerby, we do not want to be liable. At the moment, it's South Somerset District Council that look after that. So we've also taken the option to change the type of charity we are to an incorporated CIO. I don't know whether you're aware about the various differences of CIO, but we've basically turned around and we've now registered as a CIO, but we've now got to do all the paperwork of transferring the assets, which is an absolute bloody nightmare. It's something we couldn't do ourselves, so we've had a consultant along who's helped us. She's been wonderful. She's used to doing this sort of work. And effectively, it's changing the governance, because if we want to try and get new trustees into helping us run this new building, we can't turn around. We've got to make it an attractive proposition to them. And we can't turn around and say, oh, and by the way, you're liable personally if something goes wrong. So that's an important statement. So we are 3/4 of the way to becoming a CIO, or an independent organisation. When that happens, the original trust will close down, the original charity will close down, and we'll continue to run it as a incorporated. One of the things we're charging around looking for is when you start to talk to the solicitors, and we've had to employ quite high qualified charity solicitors, we have to be careful about risks of conflict between the old charity and the new charity. So one of the things that we are doing, and I'd like you to pass a message round, is that we are looking for new trustees there. So before you all take a step backwards, I hasten to add we're looking for trustees that have got a better idea of governance, of fundraising, of marketing. In other words, not the classic old museum trustee who knows a lot about the history of Chard. In effect, the museum is running a business. It's nothing else than a business. And to do that, you have to do it with business-minded people who come along and are able to work together to increase the throughput of people, reduce the number of costs, and all this sort of thing. So even if you're not interested, and I appreciate you probably might not be, could I please ask, could you pass the message around? If they are interested in looking at being a trustee in a new organisation that wants to go in different new areas, please come back to us. In the end, that's basically all I want to do. I'm a great believer. I ended up sitting at meetings at work which lasted for hours and hours and hours, and we all fell asleep in the end. I'm a great believer in a short, sharp meeting, which then gives you a time to have a rest, have a think. If you want to come back and talk to me, especially, by all means, get in touch. Robin has my email address, and we can always sit down and have a chat due to social distancing. At the museum now, you can stand outside one at one end of the field and the other end of the field and yell at each other. You're well outside the 2-meter zone. So thank you all for letting me have a whinge at you and a moan at you. Hopefully you found it a little bit interesting and not too hard going. And hopefully you can perhaps come along in some ways, even if you don't want to be a trustee, just do a bit of advice. I know Stephen does some crafty bookworking for us, doing some auditing on the books, etc. So it's all the matter about helping the local organisation. And let's face it, it's the only heritage organisation in the town. Thanks to all of you.
Right, Vince, are you willing to take some questions?
Yeah, by all means, fire. I can only gabble and give you the best I can.
Right, so if anybody's got any questions.
Vince, have you had any luck with the National Lottery in supporting this changeover or whatever?
Right. We were very lucky in that we got the retail heritage grant that was donated by the government. So we are really lucky that that helped us. Where you have a great problem is that, and perhaps don't quote me on this, but I heard this from an expert. The reason there's such a lot of lottery grants that are being given for the arts and the community at the moment is there is a concern at very high level of the government that they can't be seen to let heritage organisations and arts organisations go down the pan. So there's been a lot of money pumped into that to keep places like theatres afloat. And to be honest, a lot of that is aimed at keeping the theatres going, cinemas going, places like that going. Little museums that are tucked away at the corner of the street, yeah, they like to keep on going, but it's the big theatres that they want to keep running and keep going. It's also quite a bit of, if anybody's done a national lottery grant, it's something that really needs to be thought out very, very carefully. It's not something you put on the back of a fag packet and send off next day. It really has to be closely thought out. If we get this design going for the next year, the next stage is to go for perhaps a £40,000 or £50,000 lottery grant to redesign the museum, to redesign the layout of the buildings, etc.
Lovely, thanks, Vince.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I've got my hand up.
Ah, I saw a little yellow hand, sorry.
Sorry, Anne.
Do you have enough money in the kitty to buy the freehold?
Right. We do. We could have money in the kitty to buy a freehold. We have a cunning plan, as Baldrick would say. And one of the main reasons why we are getting these professionals in to do a survey of the building is if they are professional heritage people and they turn around and say, your thatch is going to cost you £35,000 in 2 years' time. Your building will cost you another £5,000 to do this and to do that. Our aim is to go back to SSDC with these results and put in a counter bid.
Yeah.
So why is, yes, 70,000 is the initial bid that's come from SSDC. It's not going to be the final bid that goes back from us. So it's really important to get this expertise in, understand the quality of that building, because we can use that as evidence back against SSDC to reduce that cost. If we can reduce it to half of that, and I'm sure you've all heard stories about Crow Shoot, which I think was done for £1, wasn't it, or something like that. I don't think we'll get the museum for £1, but I think we could substantially reduce the amount. And then I think it's really reasonable to go and purchase it.
Dave?
Yes, yeah. Yeah. As I'm an SSDC councillor with my other hat on, I do wonder if, I mean, obviously the district councils, they're in their own have their own financial difficulties anyway, but they have that professional officer level experience there that I would have they given you any help at all, should we say? With
the assessment of the building.
Yeah, because
I mean, effectively, I don't blame them in some ways, because they've got a huge amount on. As you know, their makeup has been totally changed, and they've got a lot of work on with the regeneration, etc.
And transformation, yeah.
Transformation and everything like that. So please don't get me wrong, they have been very helpful, but I think if we are to make a reasonable case, we've got to make a case that takes in outside expert advice, not only South Somerset.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yes, Bob?
Vince, if the council was faced with all this expense, thatch and buildings, insurance and everything else, what if you didn't buy it? Would they run it on and have the expense, or would they try to sell it commercially for anybody that would take it on?
Right. The two options we have, say if we didn't want to purchase it outright, the freehold. The second option is that they're prepared to go for a lease. So it's a carry on with the lease that they've got. But the proviso is that we then basically have to look after the building, etc. So in effect, we come out slightly worse, probably about £500 to £1,000 worse than we would be at the moment, without an awareness of any really big problems. To be truthful, it's not the fact of painting the walls that's going to give you nightmares. It's the fact that suddenly the thatch goes. That, as you all know, is a big price. Now, I'm not, if you like, aware of their understandings. I'm assuming that in the past they've done an assessment about whether that building would be an economical place to sell. So to us, it would be a challenging place to redevelop because of the access and various things. The other great problem they have got is this, is that if they close that museum down, we've got 12,500 artifacts that have got to go somewhere. So I think they will be concerned about, if you like, the bad PR of suddenly closing that museum. Yeah. It's a difficult one, and I appreciate they're in really difficult problems with not only COVID but with everything else. It's a really nightmare for them. So they've not been they've been more forthright with saying you can either rent or you could purchase. They've not really been forthright in saying, yeah, we would like that building.
Yeah, I mean, they've got an asset with all the land at the back, but how they would realise the asset with the museum there is probably a difficult question to answer.
Well, the other main thing is there is no access in at the back, apart from a narrow 6-foot wide corridor between two houses. So if you wanted to do parking or access with motor cars at the back, you're then starting to think how you could do that. Right. And it's a classic old Victorian building to sort of get around, etc. It's not an easy, it would not be an easy convert, and I think that's their concern.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course, Stanley.
Does it, most interesting talk, but does that mean that the idea that the museum was going to be removed into the new redevelopment part off Bowden Street, has that fallen by the wayside, has it?
They very early in this project, the regeneration project, there was this wonderful thought, right, let's move the museum and then we'll get 3 million quid for the old museum site, and then we're all in money. Unfortunately, they then realised that, again, with 15,000 things, there was not enough room to put all the things into the Bowden Mill. So very quickly, they came into the realisation that it wasn't just a matter of take it down the street and bung it in a new place. We were very much aware of this, and in the end, we turned around to them and said, rather than do that, what we think is a better solution is you do a very small exhibition area that the museum and other organisations in the town can share. So you have in this new development a small area that sort of has exhibition display places that museum can do, WI can do, anybody can run a little bit of an exhibition in there, and they seem quite happy because they realised it was a cost-effective way of actually moving into that building.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Well,
Deadly silence.
yeah, deadly silence. Well, all that sort of remains is actually is to say thank you very much for coming along and joining us tonight. I think it's been a very interesting talk. It's good to know, you know, what the perceived future is, and hopefully that your plans, you know, the plans of yourself and your other trustees go well. So, you know, we're always pleased to see you, and we're always pleased to be involved with the museum. You know, keep a contact with the museum because it is an important part of Chard.
Yeah. Well, this is what we do. As long as you're happy to sit and listen to me waffle for a quarter of an hour and learn a little bit more about the politics. And apologies, Dave. I realise you've got two hats sat on there, and it's always quite difficult in that sort of situation.
Yeah.
But again, if you also do want to sort of perhaps investigate just some little bits, come and have a sit and have a chat over a cup of tea.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. There was one thing you said in your talk to us that you wanted us, you know, would like us to do is to actually, you know, search, you know, find some other professional trustees. That's what I took from this. Is that correct, Vince?
That's very good. If we really do want to grow this museum as not only as a museum but perhaps as a community hub, etc., and things like this, we've got to have the community behind us. It's no point reverting back to the old days where it was a little museum tucked at the top of the street where men went in, because there wasn't any men's shed then, but they went and hid in the museum away from the wives.
Yeah.
So it's really trying to get more professional people involved in this organisation.
Right. Okay. Right. I understand. Right. Yeah. As president of Chard Rotary Club, I'd like to personally thank you for talking to us this evening, Vince, because I'm sure our members really do appreciate it. I certainly do. Perhaps we can have a chat sometime. To see if we can actually work something together. But I know the district council is not going to be any more in the next few years, because one way or another, with this unitary proposal, it's whether it's going to be a unitary county-wide or the districts are going to be split into two, basically. Something's going to happen at local government level. So I think they're going to be, Southside District Council will be focused on that, along with COVID as well. So that's probably why they're, being a little bit, as they are at the moment. Yeah.
No, I personally, I completely appreciate that. And I've got a great philosophy in life is unless you understand who else is there and what their mental thoughts are, you can't plan with them. And this is all a matter of planning together, not planning separately.
Yeah.
Well, Vince has asked that, I did ask Vince about recording this and he was happy, and he's asked that it's distributed as fully as possible. So gentlemen, if you've got no objection, normally when I put these onto YouTube, I put them on with a restricted access. But in this case, if you're quite happy, I will put this on for general public access. Has anybody any objections to that?
No.
No.
Nope. No. All right. So we will do that, Vince. All right.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
I just wanted to add there, Vince, you're talking about getting the community involved. Regarding publicising this particular talk on the Chard Facebook group, there was 10 times more interest in the community about this talk with reference to other talks. So there was a lot of interest, and normally we get about 75 to 80 reactions. On this one we got over 800. It's a shame it wasn't realised by people coming into this meeting itself, but I think when Robin publicises this on YouTube, if you don't mind, I will again put this onto Facebook via the Rotary Club Facebook group, and hopefully people will view the video and listen to what you have to say. But certainly there was 10 times more interest in this talk than others that we've done so far.
I mean, I've always meant and always really felt very passionate that the museum has to embrace the community. It has to become part of the community, not a little place up at the top of the street. And I'll do my wholehearted best to do that, because without the community behind you, it doesn't survive.
Well, again, thank you, Vince. We will go on into some other business. You're perfectly free to stay with us, or if you've got something else to do, then feel free to leave us.
I will go and have a nice, cool bottle of beer and think of you outside and think of all you lot in hot conditions. Thanks again for asking me along.
Thank you,
Take
Vince.
care.
Bye.
Cheers, bye.
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 Thank you, Vince.